Hello and welcome to today's Partner Academy Live webcast. You are listening to the Time to Thrive series presents Pursuing the Win-Win, Go Big or Go Home. Welcome to the 10th of our 12-part monthly series, webcast series to help you win in the new economy, compete to win, hit your sales targets, and thrive in our mobile world. Join us the second Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m. Pacific for a new session dedicated to improving your sales performance. You can also participate on Twitter Live at #TimeToThrive10. Our presenter today is Neil Rosenberg, who is the President and CEO of Quality Technology Solutions Incorporated. And now, without any further delay, it is my pleasure to hand it over. Neil, you now have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Deb, and good morning, everyone. Appreciate your time and attention to joining us, and I hope we can give you some good ideas and content out of today's session to help you build your business and your partnership with Microsoft and your customers. Today's event, we're going to talk about solution selling and how to work with chief CXOs or chief something officers. We'll talk about how to craft a message and get their attention, how to develop and sell a solution at that level, how to effectively sell Microsoft technologies and develop and harvest Microsoft opportunities in addition to and beyond the initial sale, as well as some pointers on how to align with Microsoft from a solution selling perspective. And again, we'll do questions at the end of the session. We should have enough time left to address them. I'll also be following the thread for the sales community on LinkedIn throughout the day. So some quick background on my company and myself. We've been in business for over 20 years and a Microsoft partner for the vast majority of that. We're a gold partner with the virtualization competency and a number of silver competencies. We're not a huge partner, a little over 20 employees. We have been locally managed for over 10 years and have won a number of awards for Microsoft and very methodological in the way we do business. From my perspective, I've been selling and focused on selling for over 10 years, but it's largely self-taught. I was not a sales professional coming into starting my business, and I think that's a good sign that a lot of these techniques are very learnable from the standpoint of building sales skills and being able to sell at a senior level within the corporate environment. And my goal is always to be a good consultant and look for a long-term win-win relationship with our customers. So let's start off and talk about solution selling and the CXO. From the standpoint of defining terms, solution selling really is about understanding the customer's requirements and not selling what you have to offer, but helping the customer to either solve problems or create opportunity. And that's a big paradigm shift. You know, we're used to the traditional salesperson saying, I have this service or this product, and looking for customers to fit those needs. And that is what you're doing to a certain degree, but you're approaching it in a different way. It's really about understanding the customer's perspective and coming at it from a problem-solving perspective, particularly in the IT industry, although this flows really across most industries. So it's really, you have to be able to talk and think in terms of business outcomes rather than just technology and product. It's really critically important to differentiate from the competition, and solution selling allows you to do that. If you don't think this way, you just become one of the many, many phone calls that these people get. And in addition, a solution selling focus positions you as an asset to senior management and has an ability to develop a recurring stream of business rather than being the hammer that's looking for nails, so to speak. If you are approaching things from a product-centric perspective, there likely won't be continual repeat business. If you're a problem solver, there are always problems to solve in any business. And that's really the key, is building a relationship that's based on value you present to the customer. Otherwise, things tend to gravitate toward price, which is where we don't want to be from a sales perspective, And furthermore, if you're not an asset to senior management, you tend to get delegated down to lower levels of management where it is about price and where your sales cycles will typically be longer. You really want to be selling solutions that provide value and interacting at as high a level of the decision-making process as you can. So that's why this is critically important. So what is a CXO? It can be a chief executive or financial officer, an operations officer, or it could be a chief information or technology officer, or we're seeing more and more permutations these days. The key is that it's a person who's looking at business from a strategic perspective, not necessarily the details. And from a IT perspective, senior IT leadership is really about alignment. How do we align technology with the business? At least that's what that person should be doing, and if they're doing their job effectively, that's their focus. At the end of our presentation, there's going to be a slide on resources, and a really great book about this is Robert McDowell's book. He's with Microsoft and worked in the consulting division for a long time and wrote an excellent book about IT value and alignment of IT with the business that I strongly recommend to everyone. The challenge that I hear in talking to CIOs and CTOs particularly is they are constantly getting phone calls and emails barraging them with solicitations that are really not differentiated from each other. In fact, one of my customers has a process where if you call him and get his voicemail, he specifically tells you, if you are a vendor, press 2 and leave a message in this box. And he may return the call if you do that. He absolutely won't if you don't. It's just a way of distinguishing people he wants to deal with because he gets so many solicitations. So the differentiation becomes so critical, and it's so much more difficult these days to get people's attention because they are being barraged from so many different sources. So you really need to think about that in terms of, if I want to sell at a senior level, how do I get their attention and how do I create value, which we'll talk about. So crafting the message and getting in the door with senior leadership. Again, the key is differentiating and having a message that's a little bit different. And part of that is talking about business outcomes. So technology makes a difference to a business typically in one of two areas. It can help to reduce costs, and that can either be hard costs or soft costs. Soft costs like time savings are easy enough to calculate. There's an interesting exercise you could do where you get the customer to agree on the value of the average employee's time and then project that out over the number of hours in a month or in a year and create a dollar value for time savings, and it's actually a pretty significant number. And if you do the math yourself, you'll figure that out based on the organization size, and that very often will pay for itself in terms of justifying a project if you can get the organization to agree that soft cost savings come back into the business. Most organizations are focused on hard costs, so that becomes a bit more challenging. So the more compelling sell is things that can increase value, which also has the positive of creating a positive PR event and getting the customer from a personal perspective to be showing success. So if a CIO can reduce cost by 2%, that's positive, but if they can increase market share by 5%, that's even better. So how can a technology increase value for a business? And if you can articulate your product or services value proposition that way, you will absolutely get people's attention. Again, your goal is, in adding value, to become a resource. You want to be a person that's in the, at this point, electronic Rolodex of those CXOs, and that you're somebody that they can tap into for knowledge and expertise and help them to be more successful in doing their jobs. And that takes some time, but a successful first project will build that relationship once you demonstrate some expertise after you've gotten in the door. Your message is really going to depend on your solution focus, and this is going to be different for LARs or ISVs or OEM partners or system integration partners or app dev partners, services, product. We're all approaching the Microsoft ecosystem from a different perspective. But what I'm finding in our prospect and market base is that people aren't just upgrading technology, every 3 years because it's old. That was the buying cycle leading up to Y2K. Now organizations are looking to not maximize their investments, but maximize the return they get on their investments and the life cycle of that. And so some organizations are stretching out the life cycles further and further. So what you really need to do to get the attention of senior management and to be able to sell at that level is present both your personal and your organizational value in terms of the impact of what you do on their business. Present your expertise as a resource and an asset to then create personal and organizational credibility. And that requires focus. If you go in and say, I'm a jack of all trades and I'm great at everything Microsoft, your credibility won't be as high as if you say, I am the specialist in .NET custom development in the manufacturing industry, or I specialize in notes to exchange migrations for mid-market organizations. So the more focus you have, the more you differentiate and create a unique value proposition. And then, of course, you have to back it up yourself in the sales cycle and organizationally in your service delivery. So, for example, from QTS's perspective, we're a systems integration partner based out of New York, New Jersey. We recently we've been running for about 10 years, our educational seminar series, which is titled our CXO Educational Seminar Series. We retitled our event To Cloud or Not to Cloud, focused on Exchange and SharePoint, whether it's in the cloud or on-premise, and really made the event focused on helping organizations decide what's right for them. And in our campaign, we identified 3 specific pain points or business value points to get people's attention as our telemarketing firm calls down to drive attendance. So things like, are you having problems with email archiving and your database is growing excessively? Or are you having challenges around collaboration for employees across multiple geographical locations? Things that would get somebody to say, that's pertinent to me, you've struck a chord. And from that perspective, that helps to get people to sign up for events because they're getting barraged with this messaging. They're hearing from all our competitors, they're hearing from other vendors, and it's largely the same. As I said on the other slide, blah, blah, blah. It gets, faded out over time. So you've got to do something a little bit different, but think of it from the standpoint of what the customer is hearing rather than the perspective of what you're saying or want to say. And from that perspective, that really does make a difference. We run SharePoint webinars, and we had the same relatively boring title for about a year or a year and a half, and then at one point we just changed the title of the event in an email blast and called the event, What is SharePoint and Why Do You Care? And it doubled our registrations. So just something that stands out a little bit from the norm in a positive way, hopefully, but sometimes bad publicity is better than no publicity, can really make a difference. It's also important to think not in terms of features, but in terms of benefits. And I'm going to touch on this in another slide in a moment. So market to organizations via email, via phone, with a message that is customer-centric and talks about business outcomes. You will get the attention of the right people talking about business outcomes, and as I'll talk about in another slide, pain, more than if you talk about features and product-specific capabilities. We talked about differentiation. Persistence is also important. There are multiple schools of thought and research studies about this, but for you to make an impression and get a returned call from most anyone, it typically takes, some people would say 6, some people would say 10 or more impressions, whether it's email, voicemail, phone messages, smoke signals, whatever works for you in your industry, to get somebody to acknowledge you. And so don't just call once and stop, or don't just send one email. You should really think in terms of structuring a coordinated campaign to make multiple impressions so that you do stand out, so that there's a recognition of you as opposed to everyone else. There's a very interesting book, and Michael Boylan spoke at Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference a number of years ago, called The Power to Get In, another recommendation of mine. And Boylan talks about creating campaigns where you leverage your industry-specific expertise and references and craft a message that will resonate very specifically to the people you're targeting, and target that message to multiple people within the organization and create a little bit of a competition to respond to you. So sending a message, for example, to the CEO, the CFO, and the CIO saying, I'm not sure which of you is responsible for IT decision-making for your organization's strategy, but did you know that you can reduce costs by 50% by doing X, Y, and Z, and we've delivered this type of outcome for 3 other organizations of your size and in your industry, named X, Y, and Z. And by doing that, you're really narrowing your message, and you're creating a situation where people will want to respond to you because they'll want to control the conversation. So sometimes the CIO might ignore you, but the CFO may respond and say, I'm interested in hearing more, let me bring you in. We've used that technique, and if you use it properly and don't overdo it, it works. You may get some negative feedback, but again, you're not going to get 100% of your prospects. So that's a good read, and if nothing else, a thought provoker in terms of how to get to that right level. And sometimes senior executives are more accessible than you would think they are. Referrals are critical. We do a lot of work in the legal industry, and we find that in legal, referrals are gold. And part of that is people by nature are risk averse. And so they'd rather take a mediocre step, but a known commodity, than a high-risk step that may have high return. Again, some industries even more so than others. So the fact that you have references in a particular industry, absolutely leverage those and try to use those to get to others within the same industry. Law firm IT directors talk to each other. Law firm administrators and executive directors talk to each other. The same is the case in most industries, and they're usually trade organizations that you can tap into. The key is creating your own credibility based on your knowledge and therefore creating a value proposition. In addition, partners like Microsoft can also create credibility, or if any of you are partners with ISVs and you deliver solutions based on a third-party technology, being a Microsoft Gold partner or a such-and-such Platinum partner, makes a big difference, especially if there's some type of personal endorsement behind it, because what that means to the customer is reduced risk in addition to your credibility. Social networking can help get in the door. It depends on whether the people that you're interacting with are on those forums and using that communication media, and that's going to depend, again, on people and industry. But there's a safety factor that I think is really important here, and that's where if you can play into that, that will help you in terms of getting in the door at the right level and getting a seat at the table, so to speak, rather than being pushed downstream. So, developing and selling the solution. When you meet, assuming you get the meeting, the real key in the conversation is making sure you're not doing too much of it. A sales call should not be, if you're solution selling, about you or your product. This is your opportunity, before we're talking about pricing or exact solutions, to understand the customer's pain and needs. And if they agreed to a meeting, there's a reason. Not just because you're a nice person, but what is the driver for this conversation. It's critical that you get that early in the process and actually document it and recap it. Microsoft calls that a sponsor letter in their selling system, to be able to replay that pain when you start talking about price, or there'll be another type of pain involved, which will be yours because the price will be too high. Or as another saying goes, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And as that works out, if you take 2 ears and 1 mouth, that's 3. So a good meeting should be 2/3 listening and asking very short, open-ended questions that pull information out of the customer, and maybe 1/3 or less talking about how great and wonderful your company is. You can create that later. Right now, the key is making sure that you're bonding with the customer and understanding their needs. And as you talk about a pain point, as Mahan Khalsa would say, who I would say is my sales idol and whose company presented earlier in the Time to Thrive series, what you can do is peel the onion, or when you have a particular pain point raised, probe in a little more on what's the impact of that. Because if you're finding that they're concerned about productivity losses, or that they're concerned about losing market share, or they're concerned about retaining talent, those things have an economic value, and presumably your solution is going to have a cost. So we need to be able to create a counterbalance to that cost in terms of either corresponding cost reduction, not as good, or corresponding value creation. That's much better, and that's also talking the language of senior management. Strongly, strongly, strongly recommend, as a follow-up to this session, you read Mahan Khalsa's book, which is listed in the resources section of the presentation, Helping Clients Succeed. So we're talking here about the language of business value. As I mentioned, there's a big difference between features and benefits. A feature is the fact that Exchange Server 2010 Enterprise CAL gives you email archiving. The benefit of that feature is that you can, with email archiving, allow employees to retain information, if that's a benefit. In some businesses, it could be a negative, and that's the importance of understanding the customer situation. It can improve performance of the Exchange environment. It can reduce downtime due to having smaller message stores. So being able to talk about what the technology means to the customer's business, and the same feature may have different benefits for different customers, becomes critical. You want to be able to then hear a pain point and be able to map that to a benefit of your solution so that you can eliminate pain or create gain. And what's important here is that you need to be able to do this across the stack of discussion you're having. If you're a relatively newer Microsoft partner, you're not going to be able to do this across the entire Microsoft product line. So pick a few areas that you can build really strong expertise in and become a real value add in that area. And I'll put in a plug here for the Microsoft Partner Network and team. The sales trainings are really excellent that Microsoft has put together over the last couple of years in terms of the different competencies, and that will really help you build a solid base of knowledge around the products with which to have these kinds of discussions with your customers. So, for example, Exchange 2010. If a customer is having pain around managing their databases and mailboxes getting too big, that pain can be addressed by the archiving feature of the Enterprise CAL. If they're having challenges around retention and compliance, again, same thing. We're now mapping it back to a product, but we're talking about solving a problem, which is much more powerful. If they're having issues around performance, we can talk about Exchange 2010 having archiving to be able to reduce the size of message stores and therefore improve performance. Or we can talk about the I/O enhancements in Exchange 2010 that lessen the load on the disk drives and improve performance by prefetching data into memory. The CIO doesn't care that Exchange prefetches data into memory. It's a kind of an interesting intellectual discussion about how memory should be allocated. What they care about is whether users are complaining that Outlook is too slow. And so let's think about that for a minute. Can we get rid of that pain? Can we make those users happy and productive and take away a pain point for a CIO? Or can we create a gain point by creating a new business capability, improving productivity, giving people better tools? So think pain gain. And as we understand the product features, we can move quickly between pain and how we take that pain away, or desired gain and how we get the customer there. And this isn't just a Microsoft world. There are a lot of third-party tools and products and options that complement Microsoft. Become an expert in messaging, including third-party solutions. Become an expert in server virtualization. Become an expert in Azure development and cloud services. And from that perspective, you then create value because you're helping the customer in areas that they may not have that expertise. And that's how you get to senior management, is by having that expertise and being an asset to them rather than one of the other 20 people cold calling them every day. After you meet, follow up with a recap. Microsoft calls it a sponsor letter. Dear Mr. So-and-so, or Ms. So-and-so, thank you very much for your time last week. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and learn more about your business. In our meeting, we discussed the fact that you're having challenges from user satisfaction around Outlook performance, around the ability to access email that has been accumulating, and the fact that your SAN is filling up and that it's going to be very expensive to add another shelf of storage. We believe that by implementing Exchange Server 2010, we can address these features, we can address these needs through the email archiving capabilities of Exchange, reduce load on your centralized storage, and improve the user experience. We look forward to our next meeting to explore how QTS, or your company name, can help you to realize these benefits. That's the language. Now we're talking. We're not just saying, upgrade Exchange because you're old. We're saying you can accomplish these things that make your life better, and I'm going to, wait for it, operative word, help you accomplish that. Therefore, you're an asset. What are the specific next steps? And in doing that, you become not only an asset, but a trusted advisor once you deliver on this once and you have credibility from actual experience. Pain sells. Senior management make decisions to invest money, which is what they're going to have to do working with folks like us, to either avoid pain, and they do that in areas like security or DR, risk mitigation, or to create gain, things like market share, sales, competitive advantage, creating an extranet or a supply chain extranet to be able to work better with other companies. There's a business reason all this stuff is happening. How does your solution help them achieve their goals? If you're not listening, you don't know what their goals are. So you've got to be in tune with them and talking the same language. My sales cycle, at least what I try for, and achieve a fair percentage of the time, is a 3-call close. My goal in a first meeting is to really do a lot of listening and note-taking, understand the customer's needs, pull as much pain out of them as possible, and collect all the background information I need to come out of the meeting formulating a solution for them. I don't have to talk about the solution while I'm meeting with them, other than perhaps at a high level, but I really want to get all the information I need to come back and work with my team to say, we're going to come back in for meeting number 2, and we have a draft proposal to present. That draft solution will be presented at the second meeting, and I want to make sure all the decision makers are in that meeting. Because if I'm not meeting with the right people, then my chances of being successful go down and the length of the sales cycle goes up. So it's very important to qualify the opportunity and make sure that I know who's making the decisions and what the process is, and try to make sure that they are at that second meeting where I'm presenting the draft and turning it into the solution with the customer's involvement and feedback. Note that by it being a draft, there's interaction, and we can refine the solution, and at that point it's not just my solution, it's their or our solution. So then we have what we think is a final solution, which we can then go back and present, and at that point do the quote-unquote selling. But if we've done it right, there's not so much selling to do at that point. So what you really want to do is understand decision criteria through direct interaction. You'll get senior management in the room if you make sure that people understand that you're helping them solve a problem, and therefore there's a value for them putting their time into interacting with you. And we try to do as much work as possible in terms of verbal communication, and then do the write-up and proposal as a memorialization rather than doing a lot of proposal writing when things may not get read, get misread, get half-read. You have no control over how people read stuff that you write. You absolutely have control when you look someone in the eye, say something, and make sure they understand it. So I try not to do proposals. We do a statement of work. We'll recap benefits in an email, but we will try to avoid written proposals, and especially RFP responses, because to me that's not being effective in your communication. And this is something I learned from the Mahan Khalsa methodology that the 95.5 people will be happy to work with you on. Success factors and outcome. This is something we try to do at QTS. From a sales perspective, during the sales cycle, we have the discussion with the customer about what they want to accomplish, what to the customer will mean this was a successful project, what's the objective. Our project manager will then recap that in the pre-project kickoff meeting with the customer to reinforce that. And at the end of the project, we'll recap that again to verify that we have, in fact, either accomplished what they wanted or they're positioned to receive those benefits. If you do that, you're showing that you've delivered what you said you would and focusing on a value and result rather than just delivering a project. That will help you get the follow-up meetings and the follow-up projects. And to me, then, if you've done all these things properly, and we actually have our own flow chart for how we handle this, we've developed a solution that meets the customer's needs and fits within their budget because we've interacted and talked with them about it. We've gotten all the appropriate people engaged early so that it's a solution that they're bought into and they have a connection to with us. And hopefully we've, in the process, reinforced pain so that there's a reason to make an investment. They expect to get a specific value in return for the investment. And at that point, the sale should either close itself or you should have specific parameters for what you need to do to close the sale, which reduces the discounting you may have to do. Make sure your service delivery then is consistent with what you said, and if you are able to do that, you should be back in talking about next projects. We're always interacting. I'm always interacting with customers on what's the next project after this one, because we make sure that they want to come back and deliver that value. So as it relates to Microsoft technologies, I want to speak a little bit specifically about working with Microsoft here from a selling at a senior level perspective. A large part of the value of the Microsoft stack is the integration of the pieces and the ease of use and user experience. You know, if you think about Lync versus Cisco, a lot of the value is the user experience and ease of use. If you think about Hyper-V versus VMware, they both do a lot of the same stuff, but Microsoft has an easier product to administer for someone who's a Windows administrator. Office, the fusion of the different components based on integration and ease of use drives productivity. So this kind of resonates across the Microsoft line. It also creates a natural upsell rhythm, which is especially powerful if you're looking at the current platform of Microsoft products. In other words, if we're working on the 2010 and 2012 products, the integrations and the value proposition are much stronger than the 2003 level product. So we want to get customers thinking and deploying current to really realize the business value of the newest technology, which is one of the best ways to deal with Google. There are so many solutions that Microsoft has that if you understand them, even at a high level, if you go into a meeting with the customer and it starts around Exchange, but you uncover significant pain around telephony and Link or around business intelligence and SQL, if you shift gears and focus on the customer's needs, your sale will probably come faster and you'll make more dollars over time, probably doing all of the work. What becomes very important here is make sure that you stay within your competencies. If you're going to be an asset and a trusted advisor, you and your organization have to bring expertise to the table. So that means not taking on things that you really can't add value to or aren't committed organizationally to doing. There is a massive partner ecosystem within the Microsoft Partner Program and the International Association of Microsoft Certified Partners that if you don't do something, either your partner manager, Microsoft Partner Program folks, the IAMCP lead for your region will be able to identify another partner that would be happy to partner with you and help the customer address that need. We're very mature in our partnering model, so my company has relationships with a lot of established organizations. We don't do Dynamics. When Dynamics opportunities come up, we have specific partners we go to that we know can deliver in a compatible style to us. You want to build that kind of ecosystem so that you become the go-to asset for a CIO or a CEO, even for the things you don't do, because they trust you and they know you'll connect them with a resource that can help them. Again, it's that risk aversity that is really important in these relationships. And think strategically. Understand the big picture of how the Microsoft products work together. There is a huge cross-sell opportunity, especially in larger accounts that are purchasing enterprise agreements of various flavors, because if a customer does that licensing purchase, they're going to have lots of stuff to deploy. And so from that perspective, if you are presenting how the Microsoft products work together, you're not talking necessarily about solving one need. You're talking about a sequence of projects prioritized based on customer needs and pain that at that point is going to upsell the value of the services you deliver, and is also going to upsell the value of what the customer gets out of their investment in the licensing program. So, developing and harvesting opportunities around the Microsoft stack. Microsoft licensing programs, as I said, are built for cross-selling. Within an enterprise agreement, just on the core CAL, you have Windows, you have Exchange, you have SharePoint, you have Link, you have System Center Config Manager, and you have Forefront Client Security. One customer could have 4 different projects for you around that. So there's a value to working with a LAR in the accounts that are greater than 200, 250 seats, and getting that enterprise agreement or that SQL EAP or that virtualization server-centric ECI agreement in place, because that means there's a lot of stuff from a services perspective to deploy, and you're then working on a deployment sequence rather than an individual project. So creates the value proposition. How are you helping the customer get value from their relationship with Microsoft, and then on to the next project. So System Center is to systems management what Office is to personal productivity. At least 6 different projects for any customer that owns System Center today. Hyper-V virtualization will naturally lead to discussions around app virtualization and VDI and systems management. A discussion around the Windows desktop can tie into AppV and System Center Config Manager and even third-party products from Citrix and other vendors. Exchange, Link, and SharePoint all tend to tie to each other very often. When we have a discussion around one, it leads to engagements around both of the others over time. You know, we start one place, we move to the next, based on customer priorities and based on the value that the solution will deliver in the business. Or just the same thing in the cloud with Office 365. And so there's so much potential within the Microsoft solution stack, not even counting things like Dynamics and custom app dev, to help customers create value, to help customers solve problems if you're actively listening and looking for and harvesting that pain. Aligning with Microsoft and working with Microsoft can be challenging but rewarding. What's really important is working with your PAM, if you have one, a tele-PAM if you're not locally managed, or PAM if you are locally managed, and work with the rep responsible for an account on a particular deal. If you're in a customer that, in the corporate space, 200, 250 seats or above, there will be a Microsoft rep responsible. Your PAM will help you find that rep. Keep them posted. Enter the deal into PSX. You may be eligible for basically a rebate from Microsoft or an incentive under the SIP program. But at the very least, if Microsoft knows you brought a deal to the table, they won't necessarily introduce competitive partners, but rather will trust you if you're doing a good job communicating to work the opportunity with them if it's in your wheelhouse. The Microsoft relationship can also help you with that CXO level reinforcement of your credibility and value. And when working with Microsoft, you got to think in terms of licensing, even if you're a services provider, an ISV, because every salesperson has a sales quota, and Microsoft is no different than anyone else. Their quota is based on licensing. So if you want to interact with Microsoft personnel, it's a question of helping the customer, but also a question of what sale are you driving with Microsoft technology. So it's got to be a win-win-win, you, customer, and Microsoft. And there are really 4 different major segments. The SMB segment, which is 250 users and lower typically, or 200 and lower. That's a largely unmanaged segment. There are Microsoft marketing resources, but not dedicated account management. The corporate account space, which is CTM and CAM, typically 400 accounts per rep or maybe 30 accounts per rep. There will be a specific named person responsible for a customer that you'll interact with and work opportunities with, or the enterprise group, or EPG, which is the team of basically major and global type accounts. And then there's certain vertical industries that are broken out, like media or automotive or state local government, that have specific teams that are separate. So your PAM will be your guide point across who at Microsoft is both a resource but also responsible for a given opportunity. So I think this is an important slide, a couple of really good resources here that I wanted to call out. First and foremost, if you were to read one book or take on one follow-up from today's event, read Mahan Khalsa's book, Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. I know in one of the earlier Time to Thrive sessions, the 95.5 folks did a session, and their program is excellent. It essentially takes the thought process in that work and brings it into a portal and creates a training system around those behaviors. I also mentioned Michael Boylan's book, which is good in terms of getting in the door. Keith Eads wrote a very good field book and workbook on solution selling that his company did consulting for Microsoft many years ago, and a lot of their sales system and process ties to that. A couple of other very good resources, Kendra Lee, Tom Sant, Ken Thorson, some of them have presented as part of Time to Thrive. And Bob McDowell's book, In Search of Business Value, is the one I mentioned about CIOs and sort of getting in their head in the thought process of the value proposition a CIO should bring to the table. So, hope those are helpful. And I would also call out, if you felt today's session was useful, hopefully you're coming to the Worldwide Partner Conference in Toronto the second week of July. If you are, I will be doing a session on Thursday from 3 to 4 on 10 steps to engage with Microsoft corporate sales. So look for that in the program. And if you're going to be in Toronto, look forward to seeing you out there and having a good event to kick off the new fiscal year with Microsoft for FY13. So with that, I will turn it over to Deb, and we'll move forward with question and answer and wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you, Neil. So, folks, if you'd like to submit any questions, now is the time to go ahead and do that. At this point, we haven't had any in the queue, so if you want to give me 1 second here, what I'll do is I will introduce our post-event survey, and then while we're waiting for folks to compose any questions that they have, Neil, I'll just ask you to say your final words for the audience. So first of all, folks, what you should see coming up here is a link to a web page. This will take you to a very short survey. We appreciate you taking a moment to fill it out prior to logging out. You're going to need to enter your email address to access the survey questions. When you're in there, know that our voting scale is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. So if you've got some great information out of this event, please send us some feedback and let us know. And then when you're all done, be sure to click on the Submit button at the bottom of the page to ensure that your feedback has been received. And with that, Neil, it looks like you did such a great job that nobody has any follow-up questions. So do you have any final words for our audience?
I think the most important points are really walk a mile in another man's shoes, or woman's shoes, as the case may be. Try to think of how your behaviors and actions will be interpreted by the senior level management you're trying to work with, and how can you help them achieve their goals, which ties back to the active listening, which ties back to the way you present your message. And think about pain and business value. If you do that, you're talking the language. And I guess as encouragement and a final comment, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. This is all largely self-taught. I was not a sales professional before starting QTS. It kind of forced me to do that in starting a business. But we've been very successful. We're a very influential partner with Microsoft from the standpoint of the revenue we drive in the mid-market space, and our effectiveness is an extension of the Microsoft sales team. So if QTS can do that, and I can do that, then you guys can do it too if you commit to the right behaviors and do the right things. So good luck, and I hope today's session was beneficial to you. And let's go out there and have a strong close to Microsoft's FY12 and get a good kickoff to FY13. Hope to see you all at WPC.
Perfect. And Neil, before I let you go, we did get one last-second question here in the queue.
Sure.
Christopher is asking, which book is the best for crafting messages? Do you remember which one? We're not able to go back to that slide.
For crafting messages, meaning getting in the door, I would look at the Boylan book. It has some good templates in terms of messaging. There's also an author, Steve Schiffman, I believe, who's written a couple of good books on cold calling. And I think Kendra Lee's book will talk about marketing and campaign approaches. I still think that if I had to pick one book, the CALSA book is the most important to the whole concept of working with the CIO and business value and pain. But in terms of getting in the door, I would look at the Boylan book as a starting point.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Neil, for thank you for our presentation today. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude today's event. Give me one moment here. I do have one reminder to give you, and it's coming up just briefly. So to continue the discussion, folks, thank you for joining today's Partner Academy Live webcast. Join us on our Sales Specialist group on LinkedIn after the webcast, where Neil Rosenberg will continue to answer your questions. And you can check him out on LinkedIn. So again, this does conclude today's Partner Academy Live webcast. All materials from today's presentation will be available internally on the Academy website within 48 hours. And partners, you're going to be able to get a copy of the recording from the Partner Learning Center within the next 48 hours. Again, I'd like to send a big thank you to our presenter, Neil, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this call.